Hello, everyone. Welcome on in. It's a new week here on the Betting Weekly Dojo. I am Nigel Seeley, and welcome along to this show. Hopefully, you've been here many times. If not, welcome in. If you like what you're hearing, or you like the show, or like the channel, the content we're producing, please hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps with our algorithms. The more subscribers we get, the more views, the more shows we can do for your enjoyment and your entertainment. Talking of entertainers, I'm joined by my co-host. It is Neil Channing. Good morning to you. Is it another Debbie Harry t-shirt on there you got there?
Another Debbie Harry, yeah. Andy Warhol
Oh,
was quite friends with Debbie Harry and made a few pictures of her. Must be probably quite valuable now, but not this T-shirt. Yeah, nice. Yeah, we did get a lot of people commented last week on the show. I think we got more comments than I can remember for a long time. I did try and go through them all. There were lots of people talking about cash out. Lots of people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't ever cash out." Several people were kind of seemed quite angry that we were even talking about it. One guy said, "I'm not even watching it. I'm telling you, never cash out." Well, I thought one guy made a good point, and I don't know, we didn't talk about this, but cashing out because of all the kind of deposit limit stuff and the affordability stuff. A guy said, "Well, I just kind of have to cash out because I can't afford to be a better that wins 300 on one thing and loses 300 on the next thing and has those swings because they won't let me deposit anymore. So I have to try and win £4 on each thing and make my money that way. And possibly that means sometimes I take a bad cash out and it might be slightly negative, but it frees up money. That's the other thing, freeing up money to do a bigger bet. And actually, I was out the other day with a guy, and he was telling me a story about when he was a student, and he had a big multi-leg parlay on a bunch of horses, and it came down to the last horse, and there was a few people there, and somebody said, "Well, why didn't you just go on the betting exchange and lay the last one?" And he said, "I was a student. I don't keep like 25 grand in my betting exchange account. I wasn't able to do that." And there was no, in those days, there was no such thing as cash out. And he just had to sit and suffer. And of course, the last one lost. That's why he was telling us the story. But I think it's not quite as easy as just saying cash out is always bad. I mean, sometimes obviously you get a good offer on a cash out. Someone gave an example. I don't know whether you remember this one. Obviously, Frankie Dettori. We remember the jockey Frankie Dettori having 7 winners at Ascot all those years ago. I think it's 40 years ago now.
I was there, Neil. I was
no,
actually
God,
there.
makes
It
us
was.
feel
It was
old.
actually
It wasn't. It
about.
was 30 years ago, actually, not
It
40.
was about 30
years
years ago. Yeah.
But there was another time which you might not remember quite as well when at Royal Ascot, I don't know how long ago this was, maybe about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. He had the first 4 winners, and it meant that the next horse, which had been a kind of a sort of a 12-1 chance, went off. I can't remember. I'm going to probably get this wrong, but I think it went off about 7-2. And somebody said, "Well, you could cash out at that stage. They were giving you very generous cash outs relative to the price the horse was in the morning." And obviously, if you do something like that where it's correlated, if Frankie Dettori does ride the first 3, 4, 5 winners, his rides will shorten. Maybe you get a better chance to cash out. I don't know. I thought about that, and I wasn't so sure. I was convinced by that argument, but I think it might be a bit mean to say that cash outs are always bad. Lots of people are saying, "Oh, it's the best thing the industry ever did to make money." I do agree, though, that the combination of cash out and the affordability stuff and people playing in a more defensive way because of that is going to be better for the bookmakers in the long run. So I did agree with that. Anyway, it's interesting, and thanks for all your comments because we do read them all, and it's definitely a topic that has got a lot to think about in there.
I also think that point about not having the money in the exchange is a very massive point, and we didn't mention it last week. The cash out gives you the ability not to be able to redeposit in another bookmaker if you haven't strictly got the cash. You can just take the option, take the money out. I think that's a very valid point because if you've got a big parlay then you've got to ask a friend or ask someone who's got substantial amounts of money, and there isn't many of them around. There's not many of them will do the favour for you, that's for sure. But anyway, that's the Cash Out conversation. That was last week's dojo. You can go through all the back history of all the dojos here. Lots of different talking points that we've got this week over the shows every week. This week, though, we're going to discuss about a couple of things. Before we do that, how was your week? I mean, the main thing this week was that I know you're a massive political bettor, Neil, one of the biggest political bettors in the country over in the UK. The landscape of the British politics scene is changing, evolving all the time, and it was a big week in midweek for British politics, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I won't go into the politics of it, but basically we've got a situation in the UK where, we have a prime minister at a general election, and Houses of Parliament has 650 seats, each member representing about 100,000 people. And one guy, who's been an MP for a while, he'd had a couple of drinks one night. I think alcohol had been taken, and he staggered out of the pub, as you do. He was just getting himself a nice kebab, and some bloke started having a go at him about being the MP, and he absolutely floored him, decked him, he did. And it was quite bad, actually. If you see the video online, he started punching the guy when he was on the ground. Anyway, probably quite rightly, he had to go to court over it, and he got a suspended sentence. So anyway, he's not an MP anymore after that. And so there was a by-election. So we had a by-election in the UK. If an MP dies or stands down or whatever, something happens to stop them being an MP, they have a sort of mini election. So we had local elections on Thursday, and they were kind of huge for political betting. But the thing that interested me was the by-election, because by-elections, they're quite hard to price up, actually. This was, I think it was the 16th safest Labour seat in an area of the country that would consider to be a Labour heartland. This guy had been an MP since, I think, 2010 in the seat. And we've now got this party, the Reform Party, who I guess, if you wanted to think if you're listening to this from America and you've never heard of them, they're kind of the sort of Trumpian, sort of right-wing Republican party, whereas the Conservatives, who had been in government for much of the last 40 years, they would be the sort of older version of the Republican Party, or maybe even a bit more like the Democrats in some ways, a bit Hillary Clinton in some ways. But anyway, but the Labour Party are more. They're probably these days they're a bit more Kamala Harris kind of flavour of politics. But anyway, there was a by-election, and I think if this seat had been contested at the general, it was contested at the general election, I think Labour were probably about I don't know, minus 2,000 or something like that to win the seat. And they did win it easily. But in the circumstances of a by-election where Reform are definitely on the rise, people are quite disappointed with Keir Starmer and the Labour government. He's got quite negative approval ratings. And by-elections are definitely a good opportunity for a protest vote. The betting, although it looked like a really hard seat for another party to win, the other thing, of course, that happens is there's a split between the Conservatives and Reform, and there was a question of whether people would do their traditional thing of voting for the Conservatives, or they would see that the way to beat Labour in the seat was to vote Reform and to kick the Labour guy out. And so all of those were the questions about it. And it did make it quite hard for bookies to price up. I think the very first prices I saw were from Ladbrokes over here. And they put up, this was before the guy had even got his prison sentence. And they put up minus 200, the Reform guys, and plus 175 Labour. And then it was kind of, 50 to 1, the other candidates. And then another firm came up and they went for, I think they must have not seen the Ladbrokes prices because they decided to go plus 125 Reform. And I did manage to get a little bit of that. And then they advertised, we've had to change the prices because of a swamp of money. And they got it into $1.20 or 5 to 6 in fractional terms. 1.84. And then it went $1.25, and then it went at $1.50. So now it's kind of 4 to 6 in fractional terms, minus 150. I got really involved. Actually, I was marching up. I've actually had as big a bet on this as I did on the old dancing competition, Chris McCaw's and the Strictly Come Dancing. So the two things are my it's funny kind of two things to make my biggest two bets of the last 12 months. But anyway, we got to the night, and I think sometime the middle of this, it sort of settled down at minus 400 really on reform, and we got to the night of the election, and now it just becomes all vibes. We have a rule in the UK that the media are not allowed to talk specifically about the election from the time that the voting starts until the time the voting finishes. So the voting starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, and people can vote until 10 o'clock at night, and all that time there's a media blackout, and then at 10 o'clock they all start talking about it, but they don't find out the result until, I think the result was expected at 2:30 a.m. and there's all these people desperately counting the votes. So between 10 and 2:30 the market was still open. Well, I mean, you've never seen anything like it, Nigel. It was all over the place. I mean, well, first of all, they started talking at 10 o'clock. They were like, oh, vibes coming from the reform campus that they've done really well. They're expecting to win. Now, all day, people have been saying, well, it's really close. It's going to be desperately close. Labour are saying that they're not really confident, but they might run it close. And Reform kept on saying, oh, we think it's really close, with every vote counts and all this kind of stuff. And then the second it got to 10 o'clock, they were like, oh, Reform are really confident. The market response was to go from minus 400 to minus 1,000 straight away. Then people started to say, oh, we've spoken to another Reform guy. He doesn't seem so confident. And we've talked to some Labour people, and they've said, oh, it's really close. So now it's back to minus 400. Then they start showing shots. So they're counting in a kind of sports hall, and they start showing shots of the sports hall. And you can see the bundles of votes. You can literally see them piling them up. And you can see that, well, they look about the same between Labour and Reform. So now I think I'd actually managed I hedged out a little bit at minus 1,000. And now, but I'd left some bets to try and bet Reform, and people started betting Labour at plus 300, plus 350 with me. So I'm doing lovely two-way trade on this. Now there's a big thing about Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform. There's a speculation about whether he's going to show up. If he turns up to bask in the glory of his candidate winning, well, then that must mean he knows they're going to win. But if he stays away, well, then it must be that they're going to lose. Well, he was spotted at a McDonald's nearby, and then they said he's on his way. They can see he had a 3-car entourage, and they were heading towards the sports centre. And then suddenly they turned around and went back and did another 3 laps around the McDonald's car park.
So, this is on the wingy going down to QPR, isn't it? For the same kind of story.
As soon as he started doing his laps around the McDonald's car park, the prices changed again. It was unbelievable. Anyway, finally what happened was it got to the time that they're supposed to declare the result, and you could see they were holding up some votes to the candidates. There was about 12 candidates, all different fringe parties, the Monster Raving Loony Party and all this kind of stuff. And the bloke on TV was saying, well, what's actually happening is there are some votes where if you don't put a cross, but you write something on the thing like I hate politics or these people are all clowns or whatever, and you write that on your ticket, well, then it doesn't count as a vote, even if you did put a cross next to one of them. But they can dispute that. Some people can say, well, actually, that cross, it's not very clear and you can't tell which one he's gone for. So people, the various people for the different parties try and lobby and say, no, that's not a real vote. The cross is not quite in the box and all this. And they have to dispute them. So they were literally doing that on 3 or 4 votes. As soon as people could see that, the market started to go haywire. but this was the big thing, and this is what I want to ask you about. So somebody then tweeted to say Labour are 200 in front and Reform are asking for a recount, but they're being told they're not allowed a recount. On the basis of that tweet, now that was not, nobody on Sky News said that, nobody on the BBC said that. That was just some guy tweeting, and a couple of other people picked up on it and started to repeat that tweet. And if you search, 200 votes recount on Twitter, you can see there's half a dozen people tweeting about it. Reform had been about, I don't know, minus 400. Suddenly Labour went minus 400 and Reform were plus 300, just on the basis of a few tweets. I mean, obviously, the thing I'm thinking about is like next manager markets are quite interesting, aren't they? You like those kind of things. And a lot of that is on rumour and speculation. I can't really think of any other market that we deal with regularly that would move on such flimsy evidence.
Well, the first thing is that it was the tweet from someone credible, was it? Or was just a random? If it was it shows you how.
It was a journalist, but it wasn't. It was like a kind of blogger journalist. It wasn't like a BBC journalist or anything like that.
And the second thing, obviously, the market probably didn't have much volume in it to be able to
very low liquidity.
Obviously, markets with low liquidity are obviously very easy to manipulate than the ones with solid markets.
But that is a massive manipulation, isn't it? To go from minus 400 one way to minus 400 the other way.
Yeah, but there's probably, I mean, to be fair, Neil, you're a political fan. There wouldn't be, how many people at that particular time would be trading that market live during the by-election? Not many. And every single one of them be across the tweet, wouldn't they? But they'd all see that tweet, so they'd all be thinking the same way. But then when the market settled down, that's when you've got to logically decide whether you're taking a good bet and where you think the market is.
At that point, that tweet went up, and it didn't really settle. It went to minus 1,000 Labour. Minus 1,000. I mean, the Reform had been minus 1,000 only about 10 minutes earlier. And then, and the BBC were next to useless. I mean, they had a bloke there and a camera crew. They went over to him and said, "What's happening?" He said, "We can't see. We're down the other end of the sports hall." I mean, people on Twitter can obviously see something, and there were people. There must have been like 30 politicians and their aides all kind of huddled round, and there was a big conversation going on, and then you could see them all hitting the WhatsApp to tell their mates what was going on. This is what's feeding the market. I want to be in that huddle. We need to get someone in that huddle, Nigel. That's what we need next time.
Well, what do you think the true price was?
It's impossible to know, isn't it? But now what happened? Anyway, then after that, there was another tweet. This time it was a bit more official, and then you could see people walking away from the huddle holding up four fingers, four like this. And I thought, well, what the hell does that mean? And somebody said, "Oh, there's 4 votes in it. Reform are winning by 4 votes." And so now that came on Twitter. They said, "Oh, Reform have been confirmed. They're winning by 4 votes, but now there has to be a recount because it's so close." So I think there was I can't remember how many votes were cast. There's something around about 30,000. So my question to you now is, if
you sound like you're standing in the political box. My question to you, Mr. Seeley.
I put it to you, Mr. Speaker. So if there's a group of people sitting around a sports hall counting up 30,000 pieces of paper, and the first time they do it, one set is 4 votes up, how do you bet on the next count whether they're going to be 4 up again, or more than 4, or whether the other mob are going to be in front?
Well, I think the key thing to do is to find out how many recounts there's been, and if the person with the votes, who's had the votes in the lead, has won, or the conversion rate of the ones who's come back and won. That'd be my first port of call. But if I haven't got that information to me
let me quickly tell you that there are roughly 5 by-elections a year, and recounts in by-elections I'd have to go through, but I would say, just off the top of my head, in the last 10 years, there's probably been a couple, but they sometimes have a recount if it's like 60 votes. This was the closest by-election, I believe, ever. It's not the closest election ever. In the general election, when all 650 are up, people have won by 1 vote before. There's been a dead heat before. But in a by-election, in my lifetime, I'm certain there's never been 1 in 4. So it's very hard, even though I've watched pretty much every single one and I've looked at the betting in the times that betting in running has been available, I think it's unprecedented. I don't think I've
So,
ever had a chance to see. I didn't really know how to price it up. Have you? I mean, in all the sports that you ever bet on, when does that ever happen? That something comes up in the sport and you think, I've just never seen this before. I don't know how to bet on it.
well, first of all, you answered your question in terms of how I would bet. I want to be with the team, with the woman with the party with the 4 votes lead, definitely,
Yeah.
100%. So if they were minus 10,000 before, or they were minus 3,000 before, I'd have to bring them into a little bit shorter because it gives the other party a little bit of hope. But I would probably still be about 70%, 75%, 25%. The ones
Well,
with the
funnily enough,
and now I put the price up and see
75-25
where the money was. Yeah.
75-25 was pretty much what the market settled on, although people didn't really seem to know. Now, when we say there's low liquidity, I mean, we're not talking about £5 bets. You could bet 300 or 400 at different times on this market. It wasn't like tiny, and obviously you can repeat bet. So, and nobody was putting up 4 figures. There wasn't like, and it wasn't like people would put up 500, 500, 500, 500 and just hit every market. It was like loads of people putting up 20 quid, 25 quid. Prices were just absolutely all over. I've never seen something so chaotic. If you had a robot doing it, I don't know what the robot would do. I guess the robot would just be, if this match gets matched, I'm going to put that in, and if that and then we'll put the other way back again. But I feel like people lost their heads.
Yeah, I would just be putting everything back in every second, every bet you take, and just moving a little bit down and just trying to trade a market. Nobody could have a real opinion on where it's going to go because it's totally out of your control, and nobody has any spreadsheet or any algo that may be able to make you a price. It will just be literally putting it in at 3 on and 3, trying to see what kind of two-way business you can do. And if you're seeing more money at 3 on, move it and try to get the other one. Because in situations like that, it's very, very hard not to make money, isn't it? If you're being sensible about it rather than taking an opinion.
Well, I mean,
were you sensible about it, or did you take?
I did. When the guy tweeted to say that Labour were 200 ahead, I looked at that and thought, well, we're not getting any official confirmation. And the pictures on the TV, everyone's standing around kind of scratching their head and looking like nothing's much has been decided. And then you try and look at the faces as well. Are the people are any of them kind of smiling or fist punching, or do any of them look gloomy? Often if you stand in a huddle of people and bad news is delivered, the body language thing you would do is walk away. So I don't know. I didn't know the whole Nigel Farage thing. As soon as they said Farage is now on his way and his car's arrived, it went to minus 3,000. And that turned out to be correct. They won by 6 votes. But during the period where they said he's doing laps around the McDonald's car park, Labour were favourites. I mean, you talk about courtsiding at tennis or having people on the ground for cricket or whatever. These by-elections, there's enough money changing hands that you would think next time there's one, I want somebody in the McDonald's car park with a mobile phone, and I want a bloke in the huddle. I want to be getting a media accreditation.
Nigel
I want to be in the huddle.
Farage can. That's what you want. I tell you, there's just ask you a couple of questions. The first thing, obviously, with tennis is the thing that we can't control, the thing we have to use our brain on rather than a spreadsheet and an algo that tells you every price at every different point, is when a trainer comes on. When a trainer comes on in tennis, obviously the market massively wants to get with the player who they conceive is to be fit. But a lot of times, especially recently, there's a lot of times where players take injury timeouts for
they just want to breathe.
Yes, for a breather. Yeah, and I think the market massively goes in favour too much. Actually.
And the thing with the tennis is obviously you're watching it, and the commentators know as much as you do because we're all watching it at the same time. The coach comes onto the court. It's not like the player is stretchered off and something's happening in a closed dressing room that we can't see. Generally they're sat in the chair having a bit of spray applied to their knee or whatever, or doing some massage or stretching or those kind of things. So we can kind of all see. With this one, it was more like something going on behind closed doors because we couldn't see what was going on in the huddle. But I do think you make a great point though, that it becomes a feel thing, doesn't it? It's subjective. It's not objective. We're having to use our experience of betting. We're having to weigh up things that we don't really know the answer to. Where I was getting the information on Twitter, Labour ahead 200, and then the information there's a recount and someone's 4 ahead. What chance is it that they count them correctly the next time, or that it's more one way or it goes the other way? Is it random? All of these things are just subjective. And actually in betting generally, when we're faced with a situation, we use muscle memory a little bit. If I've seen that when somebody gets sent off in a football match, there's often an overreaction. But the thing is, we've seen so many matches. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of matches played every year, and we know that we can look at past matches and say, this is how many times somebody's been sent off. This is when it's 1-0 up. This is the effect it has on total goals. Blah blah blah. Now, because we know about recency bias and we know that markets have cognitive biases and people overreact to stuff, generally speaking, we know that people will overreact to a red card and we should bet against that. I think with a situation like the trainer coming on in the tennis, I think you're absolutely right. People generally, because of their cognitive biases, are going to think, oh my God, the bloke's leg's fallen off. I need to be against him, even if he's just having a bit of spray and it's just a bit of a breather and whatever. My inclination in the politics betting was to feel like there's going to be an overreaction. People speculating on Twitter. When people started saying at 10 p.m. Reform are really confident, I thought, well, I better get out of a bit of my position here, because what is that based on? It's just based on vibes, isn't it? They're confident. I mean, yeah, of course they're not going to be not confident. They've been working hard to win. The people are, they want them to win. They're going to be confident. Then when Labour come out and say, oh, we think it's really close and we're counting every vote, well, what else are they going to say? So I try to not be too swayed by those kind of things. But I do think this kind of betting it's exactly all the stuff we talk about in the dojo. It's betting against recency bias. It's trying not to get carried away. It's attempting to be rational and solid, and to know in your mind what price you make something, and not allow yourself to be swayed away. And I think for professional gamblers, I feel like those are skills that you just have to have, and that people who trade or gamble are really good at, and therefore they can beat those kind of markets. Whereas if it's a football match where two teams are 6-4 and the total goals are 2.5 and it's minus $1.10 over and under, we know what price 1-1 is. I'm never going to have an edge on knowing whether it's going to be 1-1 or not. How could I possibly have an edge? We've seen a million football matches in that situation, and we know exactly what the correct price should be, around about 14.5%. I don't know. I'm right, aren't I? I must be right there.
You're 100% right. Absolutely. I mean, there's you mentioned a couple of sort of manager markets, and there's sort of stories about manager markets which I was involved in, and one of them was I used to do a lot of PR for a lot of sports books, as you know, and one of my jobs was on a Friday afternoon. We used to have to go to Sky Sports. So on a Friday afternoon, they used to have a bookie representative into the Sky Sports studio over in Osterley.
Them were the days. They wouldn't even
when
probably
people
do
could
that
talk
now.
about. Yeah, no one can talk about that. So we used to go in and we used to talk about various different sports. And then every time there was a manager market or something like that, where a manager lost his job, they used to ring us up, and particularly when it was at Sky and also when it was at Setanta as well. A bookmaker used to send a press release and say he's seen a certain amount of money for this particular manager. And they used to ring me, and I was working for a company that used to accommodate bets. So we were the middle agent. When I put the bets on for the agent, we would take a percentage. We were acting as the agent for the customer. And so we were quite independent. So we could tell the market how the market was rather than somebody just saying, and a lot of stuff that the PR man was saying wasn't factually true. And some of the bets they were saying were sort of slightly exaggerated. So we were sort of an impartial kind of sort of bookmaker middleman that would tell you exactly how the impartial view and how the market was actually going. So they used to ring me up on manager markets. How have you seen any money for any manager markets? Now we're a startup company and it needed to go on air. We wanted as much publicity as we possibly could. And I'd look at the field book, and we'd probably
every week you say, "Yeah, we've taken £1 million."
So basically, I used to go on and I look at that. I'm thinking, right, I've got 5 minutes on mainstream Sky Sports here or Setanta Sports here,
Yeah.
And what they do is they pitch it up and then they roll it every hour. So every hour, when there's a speculation about the manager, they say, and even the bookies have now got so-and-so favourite, but this guy's the manager. So I would go on and I look at the field book, and all we took is 25 quid on a guy at 6-1 to be the next manager from some random guy. Because I'm on Sky Sports, I've now got to say, well, yeah. So they used to get on me and say, look, Nigel, I say, I don't know what's been happening, but there's been a flurry of action on this particular player. And then as you were saying it, the exchange market, you would see the guy going down and down and down and down, and they repeated it. By the next day, that guy would probably be even money favourite. He wouldn't, but it just shows you that those small markets are so easy to manipulate. Obviously, like they were talking £2 or £3. It wasn't like a huge amount of money, but we were asked to do this job. Then we were telling the truth. This guy had it, but I couldn't just go on and say, yeah, some fellas had a score on this guy. So I had to sort of say, well, unbelievable. I don't know what's happened, but there has been a flurry of bets from this particular manager. And that would see the manager market completely down. And the manipulation in those markets was incredible. Famous story.
Well, I do think, I mean, you're a big fan of Sports Personality of the Year, which is another market over in the UK, TV program that happens in December.
Not so much now.
And people talk about it the whole year. I think Rory McIlroy will almost certainly win it this year, but and it's probably not much of a betting heat.
Well,
but things like that.
Don't rule out Jack Draper, Neil. Don't rule out Jack Draper if he has to win Wimbledon.
But a couple of pro punters I know spend huge amounts of time talking about the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, which is in 2 weeks' time.
And obviously, when we started the dojo, I was rabbiting on about Strictly Come Dancing, and actually, I know the reason that I like all of those. I don't love all of those things, but the reason that I like those kind of markets is because it is one man's opinion against another man's opinion. It's old school. It's old school betting. It's looking at limited information where inside information can be available, but generally speaking, people are just guessing and using their own opinion. And I feel like in those situations, I've got a better opinion than other people. But when I'm looking at, a sheet of Premier football fixtures, I definitely don't have a better opinion than the market. Of course, I don't have a better opinion than Tony Bloom or Matthew Benham or any of those other syndicates. I don't have a better opinion than you, Nigel, because I don't know the team news. I don't know the names of any of the players. I haven't watched enough football. So, why should I be arrogant enough to feel I'm going to be able to beat a market, even though it's got, only a tiny fraction working against me? Because they're so liquid. I like to play on those ones where it's all subjective. Oh God, I wish there was more by-elections.
I think the other thing about the just going back to the Eurovision Song Contest in 2 weeks' time. If you're American, this is a song contest where all the countries around Europe enter in a competition, a public vote. Nowadays, with the likes of YouTube, the people who are like the plus 110 favourites, they've got 6 million views on YouTube compared to a Latvian guy who's got like 250. But years ago, you used to have a cassette. So we used to get a cassette sent to us from the BBC, which was we had a contact, our old boss was a guy called Paul Austin who had a contact at the BBC, and he used to be able to get the cassette. And it used to be, I traded it. It was my job, one of my jobs every year. So I would lock myself away into a room and listen to that 28 of these most dreadful songs you can possibly imagine. And it was all, so you had to then price this up, and we knew the market. There was no YouTube. We didn't know anything about, no real internet. Then we didn't know anything about the people. But the one thing was, the most important thing was that, and that now it's become common knowledge because we were doing this 25 years ago. The thing about it is that the draw was the most important thing. You needed to be drawn in the last 6 or 7.
Yeah, if you go up first.
If you go up first,
because that's a cognitive bias thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That people will, they remember what they saw last because of recency bias. And if you're up first, they don't quite know how to judge you because they've got nothing to compare it with. It's you can see why it works that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was the best market to trading in the early years because we were one of the first people to do it in play, the original song contest.
It's actually a very liquid market. You know, we're talking about some of these markets being illiquid. You can bet tens of thousands on that.
Thousands,
market.
Yeah. Back in the day, it was bigger now, but we would have, so whoever came on first and second, the phones would just light up. And the amount of people who say, oh, yeah, my missus wants a fiver on this. The missus didn't want a fiver. He wanted a fiver. But they would bet what they were watching. So by the time the third song, fourth song comes, everybody's betting the third, fourth song. But by the time song number 20's come on, they were taking 10 to 1 about the third song.
Yeah.
That third song is now 150 to 1. And when the Jolly comes out at 17, well, you've slashed it into, like, it was 3 to 1 pre-tournament. It's now even money on the back of his performance. It was the best trading event you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Because for them reasons, everybody wanted to bet what they saw and not worrying about what was coming up in the future. And it was just brilliant. Everything that come on.
In terms of sports events, you know, this stuff that we're talking about, there really aren't any, are there? It has to be kind of illiquid markets with imperfect knowledge. And the way that sport is, that's actually why I like betting on the Olympics so much, because, you know, I was betting on the skateboarding and the BMX and stuff like that. And it was very similar. Basically, nobody knows anything about it, and everyone's watching the same pictures, listening to the same experts, and they all suddenly want to have a bet, and they all become experts. And, you know, the commentator says, well, this guy is definitely the favourite. He's a certainty. And the price just collapses. And you're like, well, you know, how do we know that this commentator knows what he's talking about? You know, surely I've got to bet against that. There's no, like, proper, but I don't want to say skateboarding's not a proper sport, but you know what I mean. There's no mainstream sport where that could happen to such a degree.
Well, it's all just the novelty markets, isn't it, where the players will sign managers. They're the only markets that they do fluctuate like that, and people, you have to look at the market.
Well, you know, I've been watching a lot of snooker this week, and I do think if you're watching the snooker, the commentators, you know, they're always talking
Where's the cue ball going?
yeah. But they love to talk about, like, oh, this guy's got all the momentum. So, you know, but it doesn't affect the betting on the next frame at all. Like, because people know how to bet on a frame. You know, this final that we've got that's going now, the players were minus $1.30 plus $1.30 was kind of roughly the prices. So each frame is kind of minus 110 plus 110. It's changed a bit now because one guy's winning, you know, by quite a long way. So it's slightly changed, but you know, nothing that the commentator says is going to affect those prices. Whereas if I was watching, you know, say a marathon on TV, the commentators have a huge effect. If the guy is 20 seconds clear and the commentator says, well, I think he looks like he's struggling a bit, doesn't he? Is he playing with his ankle a little bit there? You know, the price can collapse.
Hopefully the marathon
I can't think of many sports where that can happen, though.
Bit of rule if you're betting in marathon: don't bet the one in fancy dress. That would be my only rule for it. That would be anybody else. Usually bet the Kenyan, you might have half a chance, but the guy dressed up as Big Ben, I think, might struggle a little bit. Before we go, obviously we spoke about politics here, and obviously Neil mentioned the Reform Party, who The leader of the Reform Party is Nigel Farage, who's now the favourite to be the Prime Minister in the UK in the next election. I've got to tell you a funny story about Nigel Farage. I think I've told you about this, isn't it? He lives literally out of my house, do a left, do a right, 200 yards, left-hand side. Nigel Farage lives. He's very close to where I live. And you see him in the local pub. You see him in the local... I was in the cafe the other day. I was in the cafe. Anyway, about a year and a half ago, there was a petrol station, and it has a supermarket in it, in the petrol station. And whenever you're short of anything in the house, your loaf of bread or your milk or anything, you go to the petrol station to get your stuff. Now, my missus is Paula. Now, she's a little bit deaf in one ear, Paula. She's got tinnitus in her ear, and she's got a little bit deaf, so she shouts quite loud.
She spent a lot of time sitting next to you.
Exactly. It's funny, she can hear a lot of things that you don't expect her to hear. That's the one thing I do know. But anyway, so she's in the local supermarket, and she's unaware. And she's going around getting bits of bobs all around and stuff. And she's a bit oblivious to what's in front of her. But there's a queue of people in front paying for their petrol and paying for their goods. And I'm in the queue paying for our petrol while she's running around the shop. There's about 6 people. And she's shouting out. And in front of me is Nigel Farage. So Nigel Farage is in front of me. I'm behind Nigel Farage. So Paula's shouting out.
Just Nigel's all over the place in this story.
I hear her shout, Nige, do we need any milk? And he's gone round like, I don't know who she is. And I knew straight away I'm going to play this on a bit. And next minute I didn't respond to her. She went, have we got enough bread, Nige? We got enough bread, Nige. And he's going around. I really don't know what's going on here. And I let him go on for about 3 sort of items that she wanted to know. And then in the end, I turned around and said, I'm Mr. Farage. I said, that's my partner. She's Paula. My name is Nigel as well. And, I didn't. I thought. Then he could be the Prime Minister of England. Anyway, he's the second most famous Nigel in our village after me.
And Paula bought him a pint of milk and a loaf of bread. So there you
go. Yeah. But anyway, she's mad. That's it then for the Betting Week. But I think the moral was actually what Neil said there. Sometimes in betting, we look at these algorithms, we look at these stuff, we look at these big syndicates, and when you're betting big, high-profile events, it's very, very hard to beat them over a long term. But when you see something like this and you just have a feel bet, sometimes when you have those feel bets, offer you the best value. So, if you've built up a load of knowledge and you think your opinion is right, where you're betting against other people's knowledge who haven't got the expertise as yourself or the belief in yourself, sometimes there offers
I'll be interested actually what people's comments are, because obviously I've come on here very arrogantly today and said the reason I can win on them kind of things is because my opinion is better than anyone else's. And but I do think as a professional gambler, you have to be prepared to back your opinion. And so markets where you can have an opinion, that's basically my point. I'm interested to hear what people think about it though.
Yeah, let us know your comments as well. Neil, what are they going to do before they can't obviously put a comment in without doing what we ask
leave
them
a comment. Subscribe. But if you're going to make the effort to type something in there on YouTube and leave a comment, you might as well just give us a little click on the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, well, I don't know what you're doing really. I mean, sort your life out, because if you do join us every week on the dojo, you might as well subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. Just press the button. And you'll get to see whenever new content comes out. And, we do this largely on a Monday every week, sometimes a Tuesday. And we'd love you to join us every week.
Yeah, next week will be a Tuesday because I'm in Rome. And we haven't even mentioned the Pope betting, where it's suddenly looking like a 2-runner race. Pietro Parolin is now down to...
Maybe we'll talk about that next week. I'll
be there. It could be, I think it's going to be Pope Simon Holden the first, but that's a different matter.
I actually got called by the BBC in France, interviewed me this week to ask me what I thought about it. So I forgot to mention that. Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
What did you say?
Well, I didn't really give an opinion on who's going to win it. I was just talking about kind of, they were amazed that people bet on it, and they wanted to sort of talk about, how much people bet and, whether the market knows what it's talking about.
Just say about 2 minutes before the white smoke comes out the Vatican, then there's a huge influx from Italian sort of areas on the the thing is here though, the two market leaders in that have both had a bit of a bad press at the weekend, so surprised that there's been money from them. I thought there might be a little bit negatives, but that's to come. And there is so much content coming here on the Betting Weekly Studios on YouTube. Not only the dojo every week, myself and Neil, we have the Premier League show, we have Game Bet Match, we have the WTA show and Extra Time as well. But now we've added to our daily roster. So this is what has got in store through to Monday through to Friday now. 11 o'clock every day, Betting Weekly Live. It's 11 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the UK, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Then we have Betting Weekly Tennis Live, Monday through to Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 o'clock in the UK. And now with two American-style shows which will be launching at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Betting Weekly Hardball with Doug Kazarian. That is 7 p.m. English time. And at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Betting Weekly Fast Break, which is a basketball show previewing the NBA and all the action with Doug as well. And also Adam the Ball will be looking at Hardball as well. Hardball is a baseball show, and that is 8 p.m. in the UK. So now we have 4 live shows every day through from 11 till 3 p.m. and 4 through 8 p.m. in the UK, as well as our usual previews on the Premier League and the tennis, the women's tennis, and what is fast becoming the biggest and most popular sports betting YouTube channel around. That's it for this week. Enjoy your week. Have a good week, Neil. I will speak to you again. Well, I'm flying back on Monday evening, so it's probably going to be Tuesday. So we'll speak again on Tuesday. Have a good weekend. And please do subscribe. Please do follow, not only on the YouTube channel, on our socials, @BecauseWeWin. Have a good day and have a good week. And we'll speak to you all again next week. Take care.